Hello, everyone. This is Dr. James David Ballard. I'm your professor for SOC 400, Organizational Theory. I've taught this class for many years now. It's one that I believe is the most useful, especially if you're doing papers for other classes, but also when you go on to a master's degree. Theory is always really important. It should be used by you in your current job if you want to reorganize or figure out a way to make your organization work differently, better, hopefully. So you have to use these as kind of prescriptions, if you will. So as we go through them, keep that in mind. So let's start with just looking at the syllabus. Then we'll look at an introduction lecture just to kind of get you some background. But again, I'm Dave Ballard. I live in Indiana. So when we broadcast and talk to each other each week, you'll see me. This is my office. Nothing great. It's just a home office. But occasionally you might see my wife over my shoulder working at her computer. She's a photographer, so she does all kinds of stuff with, I don't know, she's some kind of artist. I just don't get that part of the thing. I'm much more kind of on the logical side of the world. And how we got together, we met in grad school. It's a good story. Anyway, enough of that. Let's talk about this. If you haven't seen this program before, it allows me to share some documents with you. So on these lectures, you'll see that I will have some PowerPoints. They are basically the articles in the chapters, but I give you a little background to help you. Some of these articles are hard to read. Some are not hard to read. So I'm giving you a little backup on that. Please look at the Canvas site. And also look at, for the specific readings I tell you to focus in on. This book looks kind of daunting with 700 pages, but basically I cut it down to about half if you focus in on the readings. That doesn't mean you don't want to read the other stuff. It just means that, let's be honest, we have 7 weeks together, not a lot of time, so let's try to keep it reasonable. There are 3 things that you do in this class for grades, and those are important for you, I'm sure. The first is you will have 4 quizzes. The quizzes are on the chapters. You need to know the details on those. Each quiz is about 20 questions. It's worth 50 points, so 2.5 points a question. Those are spaced out and show up on your Canvas site, so you can see when they're due those weeks. You have participation. Participation has 3 different components. Number 1, you have to look at the materials on Canvas. I didn't put together this material for no reason, so I will reward you if you actually download it, read it, listen to it, etc. Oh, I'll just do that, stay 27 seconds and I'm gone. Well, the technology can tell me exactly how long you're on there, what you looked at, which pages you looked at, and so on. So I will take that into account. And if you don't want to review it, it's going to harm your grade. So that's part number 1 of participation. Part number 2 is commenting to each other. You have forums, which I'll talk about in a minute, or discussions. And those forums, you're going to post answers. Now, having comments from your fellow classmates may help you, especially if they're done early, may help you get better grades. So, for example, somebody could say, hey, you left off a part of your essay. And you could go, oops, and go back and resubmit so that you have, now you get all of the points as opposed to missing some. You can also have conversations. I work for Department of Public Services, Social Services, excuse me. And DPSS is one of the bigger suppliers of students for our program. So you might find people at other offices. They're not all out in the city of industry. They might be throughout the county, and that would allow you to connect with some people and start maybe doing some social networking. It's a good idea. The third aspects of it are, of course, are the weekly Zoom sessions. Now, our Zoom are on Wednesday nights at 6 p.m. What if I can't make it? Well, my boss made me work over. Okay, lighten up. It's cool. You have to watch the video the next day and put a summary up on the link, which is below the video link. So you basically have to do this by yourself. You're not going to be able to ask questions like the other folks, but you, to get credit for being here, have to do something. And that means you'll have to review these recordings for each week and then post a summary of that. There's some details on the Canvas site, so on. So those are your three aspects of your participation. The third thing that you get credit for are these discussions or forums. I have a tendency to use the word forum, but they're discussions. They're the major grade. There are 6 of them. Each is worth 100 points, and they're basically your writing component of this class. So read the chapters, review these videos or these PowerPoints, make sure you participate, and write your forums on time. There's a deadline for them, and you need to make sure that you meet that deadline because the penalties are pretty stiff. It's 50% off if you're a second late. Up to 1 day, it's 75% off after that. And then after 2 days, forget it. You don't get any points. So you need to be on the ball. You need to plan your time appropriately and hopefully make all the deadlines, okay? It's laid out all on Canvas, so please take a look at that. All right, so now let's take a look at the syllabus so that you can take a look at it. There's my name. My official name is James David Ballard, and it's doctor because I got a PhD. But I go by Dave, or Dr. Dave, or Professor Dave. I really am not very formal as a person. I'm a working class kid, came out of Wilmington, San Pedro area. Los Angeles was my home for many years, and we moved here to take care of my wife's family after my family had passed. So take a look at the syllabus. You'll see it's got all of the bells and whistles we're supposed to have. But right here, forums, 60% of your grade, 100 points apiece. Miss one, you lost a letter grade. Quizzes, half a letter grade each, so 50 points each. And then participation is significant, and I explained the 3 aspects of it just a minute ago. There's your book, Sociology of Organizations, Mary Goodwin and Jody Hoffer-Gettel from Sage Publications. Just to help you out, this is what it looks like. It's red. There's another one with a very similar title that's blue. You want red. It's kind of brick red. You see it? Everybody? Cool. Go and use that ISBN number. That'll help you. That'll help you make sure you get everything correctly. Here it talks about our Wednesday evening Zoom sessions. I said 6 a minute ago. There's actually only 5 meetings because one of them falls on a holiday. We don't get together on the holiday, do we? So no July 4th. Yay! I may record something if there are issues that I note in your writing or whatever, or as we get towards the end of the class. But don't worry about it. It'll be fine. A bunch of stuff. some details. For example, on the forum postings, you need to comment on 3 other students. Notice that it's highlighted, it's in red, it's bolded. It means something. It's part of your participation grade, right? There's a rubric about what I'm really looking for. Late is not good for you. You automatically drop down to an F when you're late. Yeah, 50% off, that drops you down to an F. So please be on time with those. That includes your comments. In fact, your comments can be early, even if you're waiting to make a posting. That way people can, you can actually learn from other people's. All right, quizzes, not hard. They're really just to ensure that you're reading the materials. I've looked over them. They're not difficult. They automatically grade. You also have the opportunity to take these. You'll see when you go on, if you haven't ever taken a quiz. They're pretty easy, okay? Participation, there you go. Again, I've already brought that up. Grade allocations. Look, most of you want a really good grade. You're going to have to work for it. Reading, writing, commenting to other people, being polite, and participating. It's pretty easy. A detailed list of when things are due. Please note, we have a deadline of Monday at 12 noon. I moved it from the typical Sunday night so that people, if they wanted to work past midnight, they could. But it's Mondays at noon, not 12:00:00:01. It has to be in by noon. The Zoom sessions are on Wednesdays. The quizzes are due the same time, Monday at noon. Matter of fact, everything's due on Monday at noon. So it's all laid out here. There's no final paper. There's no final test. There is me doing the evaluation of your participation, and I do that the last week. And that last week is only 2 days. We don't even have a Wednesday. We just do Monday and Tuesday. So that week, I will go back and I will look at everything you've done, including everything you've looked at on it. Notice that each week, I also tell you which specific readings are the most, shall we say, beneficial. Now, in lecture on the chapters, I will talk about much more than just these, but these are the ones that you should read, okay? So the key authors in Chapter 1, Follett, Ochi, Powell, and Lawler et al., meaning there was a bunch of authors and I didn't want to write them all down, all right? You'll see that Section 2 has Weber, Follett. Heck, you'll see Follett multiple times. So you get the idea. Mary Follett is an incredibly important theorist in organizational theory. All right, so I think that's enough on the syllabus. It's posted. It's been sent to you. You'll have it. But let's take a look at the first lecture that I wanted to do for you, which is really just talking about the intro. What are we studying? What are we doing? Why is it so important to understand theories of organizations? There's the name of the book again, yada, 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 looking pretty. Let's start with sociology. Why are you taking a sociology class? You're in a political science-based program, and you had to take lots of other classes, let's say communications or whatever. But this class looks at the sociology of organizations, and that's a unique subspecialty of sociology. Now, sociology looks at a lot of things, but for those of us that study the sociology of organizations, we delve in these theories all the time. We as sociologists tend to interpret society as how it's held together, just like it's an organization. What holds us together? Is it formal rules? Is it relationships? Those kinds of things. Basically, the biggest thing that sociology brings to the study of this discipline or these of organizations is that we recognize that there's non-rational. So Weber will talk about the rational basis of organizations, but sociology, like Mary Follett, brought in the interpersonal, the relationship, the non-rational. And it's a very important insight. Sociology is multi-causal, problem-oriented discipline. We don't look at a single factor. We look at multiple factors that cause people to do things. That's also part of its unique robustness in looking at organization. We're critical and reflexive. And that makes people uncomfortable sometimes when we criticize what they do, how they do it, and so on. We as sociologists look at the world. We look at our own beliefs. Our own theories. We're our worst enemies because we criticize everything. And it's really kind of fun. And ultimately it impacts who we are and how we see the world. All right, the Sociology of Organizations book has some central themes. It looks at current theoretical perspectives on sociology of organization. It gives some classical perspectives. It takes that rational approach, which is really the bureaucratic approach, but it also looks at the other alternative ways of seeing organizations. So we have highlights, people like Max Weber, who really wrote the book, literally, on bureaucracies, and Mary Parker Follett, who is a personal hero of mine. Not a lot of sociologists talk about female theorists because a lot of them were, we even call them the dead white guys. Well, Follett was different, and she really made an impact in this field. So here are the paradigms. A paradigm is nothing more than a group of theories that help us organize how we're going to think about the world. There's the rationalist approach, and Max Weber is one of those. There's the interactionist approach. There we see Mary Parker Follett. She does a lot of different stuff, but you'll see she mostly falls in there. The conflict, which is an approach that's epitomized by a theorist like Karl Marx. And functionalist. Now, functionalist is a way to understand society in its functions, how it interacts and works with each other. So it goes closely with the rational approach, but we do bring it into these discussions. So you'll see some of that here. The early theorists in the rationalist paradigm were people like Hobbes, Rousseau, Weber. Those are some pretty hefty hitters on the theoretical way of thinking. The key concepts are rational choice, that humans make rational choices. Exchange theory, I do something for you, you do something for me. Functional rationality, see that connection between functionalism? Instrumental rationality and cost-benefit analysis. Some of these things you have actually heard of. Cost-benefit analysis is done by many, many organizations. Well, it emerged out of this paradigm. There's some assumptions behind the paradigm. People are rational, free, self-governing. They make rational decisions based on short-term cost-benefit analysis. People do think about considerations of the public good, solidarity with others, reputation, and so on. But those are deemed non-rational. In other words, they are lowered in the eyes of these theorists. How you do art observations or some ideas, it grew out of the philosophical tradition of the social contract. That's why Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, and those folks show up under this. It really looks at the individual as the unit of analysis. It's very consistent with economic thought because economics kind of grew out of this. So there's a lot of kind of focus in on how to maximize efficiency. So you'll see that. It's really good at predicting individual decisions in a market. It really has a problem with people who do altruistic behaviors, workers that stand together in solidarity, and those kinds of things. For example, it has a difficult time talking about nonprofits or NGOs. So there are other ways to think of the world, and that's the interactionist paradigm. Follett was one of the early. Weber was one of her contemporaries. And yes, I said he wrote about bureaucracy, but Max Weber wrote about it. He's one of the most prolific writers there ever was in the social sciences. He moved around, okay? So you'll see him in multiple places. George Herbert Mead, Herbert Blumer, and Irving Goffman. Goffman happens to be one of my personal favorites. Taking the role of the other, we learn by how we can empathize with people. Dramaturgy is a term from Irving Goffman. We have front stage behavior and backstage behavior. The idea is this, that when we're out in public, when we're going to work, we put on a face, we put on like an actor, and we play a role. And then when we're done, we go home and we have a different role. And that front stage is what people at work see us, but the backstage is what our family sees us as. And sometimes there are some real differences between those two. This paradigm focuses in on qualitative methods and things like participant observation. And you'll see the term Verstehen in there. It's the idea of how you identify with people. There's some assumptions, and these are really important. Reality is constructed through human interactions. People negotiate the meaning of situations. Think about that one for a minute. If you are working in an office and everybody says, oh, this is a great place to work, you start to feel that every time you go to work. Likewise, if they say, oh, this is a terrible place to work, and you're the first day there, pretty soon you're going to adopt that kind of same meaning of the situation of work. Human identity is social and contextual. People are changed by interactions with others. You know, this sounds like simple stuff, but if you're a bureaucrat, it doesn't matter. The rules are what matter. But what this is saying is people matter. And that's a real difference between the two. So it has some strengths, the ability to examine, develop yourself within a social context. It talks about relationships, but this emphasis on subjectivity is problematic, as is the idea that science is not necessarily a good thing, so it's anti-positivistic. Conflict, there's Marx, there's Follett again, there's C. Wright Mills, and there's Weber again. Notice that these people dabbled in theoretical speculation across paradigms. Workers' consciousness, if you're a boss and the workers are resisting the changes that you want, sometimes understanding what the conflicts are might help you. False consciousness, alienation, resistance, ideology, objectification, all of these have specific meanings, and you would find if you at least have a good grasp of what those are, you might be able to find strategies to change your workplace. For example, how do you make people feel less alienated? One is to get them to feel part of their job, not just that they come in, they do their work, and they leave. And getting that buy-in from people is a very difficult thing, but first you have to identify it. So the conflict paradigm can be very helpful to you as a manager. Okay, there's some assumptions about how resources are unevenly distributed, and power and resources help us change the social order. It's really the power through the domination of resources. You know, it sounds really, you know, kind of workers' party, but I got to tell you, when you're working in an organization, this can give you some really interesting insights. For example, its strengths are you can look at the injustice, how some people are left behind and some people are not. You can create social change in an organization using a conflict paradigm model. You can look at the structure of the organization and analyze it to see who has power and who doesn't. And maybe there's a boss that's not doing their job well, and you can identify that. And it can also help you identify solidarity in groups. Weaknesses, it really doesn't help you understand how people just kind of get together on agreements. And, you know, sometimes change is difficult. I was working for DPSS a couple of years ago, and they were going through a new computer change, and everybody hated it. It was just, oh my goodness. And it was all as part of the Obamacare change and how it was going to go. And so people were frightened. You could hear it in their voice. They wouldn't articulate it that way, but they were really frightened by the change. So the conflict that arose was out of that. And just even as an outsider there for a couple of weeks, I was like, wow, this, you know, is a good case study of what this paradigm would focus on. The functionalists, we see people like Emil Durkheim, Talcott Parsons, Robert Merton. Merton gave us this idea of anomie, that people can actually not know the rules. I know that sounds weird, but in a fast-paced environment where things are changing rapidly, the rules sometimes get a little blurry. And so this concept brings it in. We see things like solidarity. Excuse me, I think I said Merton said that. That's Durkheim. Solidarity, you know, how you can have different types of ways of getting people to bond. How rituals are important to an organization. You know, I work in higher education. Everybody, it's not the most high-paying job, but there are some intrinsic rewards. When I have students that graduate and they come back 10 years later, this just happened last night, and they tell me these very successful stories of how they've gone on to a very successful career. It really does bring some joy to one's heart. Funny, but that student was still using the ritual of calling me Dr. Dave even after all this time, 10 years out of class, and being very formal, even though I know him and I know his family and I've had a lot of interaction with him. Sometimes changes in organizations, sometimes just organizations, they have manifest and latent functions. They have things that they say they're going to do and then things that happen. That's a really important idea that you could read about in this first introduction. There's some assumptions about this. There's some observations about this. There's some strengths. They're not obvious theories, but they do apply to things that you might not think of: war, crime. If you're working at a criminal justice agency, this might be a way to understand what's going on. It is the most developed typology of group solidarity you'll see. So the functionalist folks have really focused in on that. It doesn't really care about social change. It doesn't care about justice. And those are some things that maybe you in your workplace really need to focus in on. It's a very conservative paradigm, if you will. All right, challenges to organizations. We're going to look at these four paradigms and how three things all organizations go through. How do you coordinate the activities within an organization? Well, the functionalists would focus in on conflict, or excuse me, the conflict folks would focus on conflict. The relational folks would focus on relationships, the bureaucracy on the rules, and so on. Likewise, control. How do you keep people in control? How do you keep people from, not taking advantage? You all have people where you work that may not be working as hard as some other folks. Maybe they're working not as hard as you, and it makes you angry. Well, that's part of the control function. It's also part of this next one, conflict. How do you handle conflict in an organization? How do you handle it when people have conflicts? And those conflicts can be based on gender or race or sexual orientation or workload, or the people that get to work from home versus the people that must be in an office. There's lots of ways conflict can come up. All right, that closes out this introduction to your class, introduction to the syllabus, and introduction to your book. That's all in the book, that last part of it, so you can take a look and hopefully use your time more effectively by me giving you some hints about what's to come. Think about in terms of paradigms. Each time you're reading, what are they talking about? The titles of the chapters will give you clues. So you'll get, you'll be going, well, wait a second, that Weber was this way before, or Follett was that way before, and now they're different. Remember, these folks wrote for decades, and they looked at different aspects of different organizations. So, of course, they brought, just like a doctor would, they brought different tools or different theories to different situations. You should adopt that same approach. Don't be rigid in how you think of theory. Be able to adapt the specific theories or paradigm to your work environment, and those may change over time. That's the lesson of seeing these folks in multiple ways. Thanks, folks. Welcome to your class. I'm really looking forward to this. If you can't tell, I really love this material. So I hope that you learn to love it as I do. Be well. Have a good evening.